people stopped buying it. So and DC stopped printing it. So
but I mean, if you look at Garth Ennis, that's what he makes his money off. Of like making like the most violent, ridiculous stuff.
For those who don't know, Garth Ennis writes Preacher, right?
Yeah, Preacher.
A ton of good war stories.
Preacher.
And soon to be a movie, The Crossed.
He does,
God,
Cross,
really?
which is like just ridiculously violent. It's like.
But also telling a story too. I mean, Garth Ennis is at his best when it seems like a story.
That was a story.
There was a story.
Disagree with you. I mean, there's stuff that's a story.
It was a story that balked at the end because people started getting worse and worse, and I almost wanted to just sink down into complete entropy. And it kind of like balked and had like a happy ending story at the last minute. It's like,
when they realized they're the last generation of humans on the face of the earth and wander off in the mountains to die, that happy ending?
Right, I gotta backpedal a little bit.
Glint of hope ending.
I don't want to go too off topic with a review, which we can certainly do later.
Oh, yeah.
But going back to just Garth Ennis in general, definitely.
Yeah. I mean,
really grounded, right? Really grounded, gritty stuff. Like.
Yeah, I mean, like.
I wouldn't necessarily say grounded.
Compared to
comparably, yeah. You know, people get shot, they die. It's not like, oh, I was shot in the shoulder and walked it off. It was, oh, I was shot in the shoulder and then bled out 3 hours later.
I mean,
but there's also two types of Garth Ennis violence. You had Preacher, which was always done for laughs, and Steve Dillon's art helped with that. And then there was what she's holding there, the Punisher Max,
which is really great series.
Which was really great. Disembowelments, like striking people against a window until the window gives and the person falls. I mean, that much more disturbing a context. I mean, the first Garth Ennis Punisher series was hilarious in some of the parts.
Was that Welcome Back, Frank?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah, yes, and the famous line gun to Wolverine's crotch, and the Punisher is like, "Don't worry, they'll grow back." I mean, it totally played up for laughs. But the Punisher Max series that Garth Ennis just finished up a while ago. I mean, that was like talking about the consequences. I mean, like one thing he did, like back in issue 1, had repercussions for 40 or 50 issues.
Well, I'd say he went farther than that. He almost pulled a sort of Rambo, where it was like repercussions from the Vietnam War, what Frank Castle saw there and how it haunted him. And it was kind of interesting because he took what could be viewed as a very violent, almost irredeemable sort of exercise, orgy of blood and guts, I think I heard someone call it.
Right.
But then it turned out to be a meditation on violence begetting violence and whether it was all just part of a cycle, and it became a little bit more insightful than your average, Punisher comic. But I mean, that was the thing too. Is he almost used it as an element of the story. He used the violence to sort of point out how violence isn't a good thing, and all of this was feeding into itself. And that what would it take to actually break out of it kind of became the constant theme, and then whether it would be possible or not.
Did you ever read Garth Ennis's Punisher: The End?
Yeah.
I mean, if you take Punisher Born, which is the beginning of the Punisher, as written by Ennis, and go all the way to the end. Yeah. I mean, that's the Punisher is going to go on forever. As long as Marvel stays in business.
That's his idea for the character was that he would be a person who would view that as a possibility.
But my point is that as far as I'm concerned, in the Ennis world, the Punisher is dead, and he had the worst. It's the end of the world, and Garth Ennis sends the Punisher to kill the last living humans because he just decided the human race is a bad idea, and he basically is left to die of radiation poisoning. He's like, okay, the world has ended. You don't turn into a mutant from the radiation. All you do is die, and I'm the last person alive. Okay.
But
I mean, that's what the whole premise was a war you don't want to end, and he shows the end results pretty cleverly too.
Yeah, no, that's he's using the violence to illustrate about violence, but sometimes he just wind up with stuff where it's
ridiculous. I mean, he goes completely overboard. I mean, if I do an example right now, you have to cut it out because it's too graphic. It's just he does the most ridiculous stuff. I mean, it's so violent to the point where it's kind of hey, I like violent stuff. Like I said, I like when shit hits the fan. Everyone's killing each other, whatever. But his stuff, it gets to the point where you're okay, you're just trying to impress me with your violence. It's come on, put something in here that's a little more substantial, so I can actually feel something when I read your book instead of feeling bad.
The difference between Punisher and Crossed.
Exactly.
Punisher, there was a story. You felt realizing the extent to which violence defines, Frank Castle. But Crossed, it was just like, what? Why are you even, like, at this point in time, like, it was like, why am I following this? It was.
I liked it
like
as an experiment. I liked it as an
That's just what
experiment
it
in
is.
entropy, and I'm kind of dreading that's going to be an ongoing series as well, like in light of the movie coming out.
Well, that's the thing. It wasn't a story. It was a series of violent vignettes. It was quite literally a handful of loosely connected incidents with no underpinning. It was just like
with the same characters.
It was like the point in time where I was like, I would pick it up and I go, oh, they just raped a child and killed it.
That's great.
Well, yeah, because
nice.
that only happened. Like, yeah, it was like I couldn't even be shocked anymore by the series.
I always see the violence as trappings, and I was just really interested in like the human elements and just like what was going to happen to the main character. Was he going to snap if he was just hanging on to this woman who was responsible for his survival and trying to get like some kind of requited, not even love, but affection, and it just seemed to like be spiraling. And then at the last issue, there's kind of like this last minute confession. They get back together. I'm like, okay, that's a little bit of a cheat, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like it's like he wanted to write like a love story. It's like, oh, well,
So you
I can't really do
zombified the
this.
world?
Well, so I'm just gonna have everyone rape and kill people and zombify them, so people don't think I'm a pussy. Like, come on.
I mean,
you
if
know?
I was going to pick a story if I was going to pick the work from Ennis that, had the perfect balance of like violence and consequences, I wouldn't even pick the Punisher as much as I like that series. I'd pick any of his war stories for DC.
Oh, those are great.
Well, yeah,
those
of
are
course.
really good.
I mean, because the Punisher, he can never really do that. He can never really have like the ultimate consequence. I mean, he kind of snuck it in his alternative story with the end, which is why I like that so much. It was kind of like a little sneaky insurrection.
Well, and
there.
the whole he
But
actually had him age in real time. He was getting slower. There's almost an implication.
But with the war stories, almost everyone dies in every single story he does, and it fits because it was a real war, and he can tell those stories now.
Right. So is violence then only a problem if it like throws you out of the story?
For me, it is, but I'm an adult.
Right.
I mean, violence for violence sake, I don't really like in the kids' comics, if only for no other reason. I mean, gratuitous violence. And what's gratuitous violence? I mean, everyone's got that line. I mean, for me, it'd have to be like Kick-Ass, or even like the Marvel Comics is written by Brian Bendis, I hate to say. But, something like Bone, I have no problem with. The Stuff of Legend, which is a... kind of being touted as like a kid's book, but pretty dark. I gave that to my friend's kid, and I'm like, I think you'll like this, because it was pretty violent. There was death in the first issue, but I thought it was incredibly well told, and I'm like, okay, I think he's old enough to deal with this. So I mean, I don't totally, I don't want to totally remove violence from the story, but
just like a balancing act.
It really is.
Well,
it really is.
The violence has to have like a point. If you just have violence in there just to have violence, just to get people to read your book,
right.
I mean, then that's just like, why am I reading this? All this is just stupid violence or some shitty story.
Right.
It's going to be a movie later on, and Mark Millar wrote it.
Yeah, I mean, like it has to have some kind of meaning to it, not just like violence. Like, oh, we're just gonna have everyone kill each other and rape each other. It's like, like why? Like maybe like a reason. I mean, like I don't want to read a book about raping. I mean, you know what I mean? It's just kind of ridiculous.
Millar.
Yeah, well, I'm reading Millar's Nemesis, and it's just splashes of red.
Did you read the latest issue?
No, I've kind of given up on it.
It jumped the shark. It officially was like over.
Right.
Like I picked it up,
really?
I flipped through it. I want to put it this way: I was actually a little bit disgusted, just by like not necessarily the depictions of violence, but just like to the extent to which the characters degraded each other. It was like, you know what? I'm done. This just hit a point where the fact that you conceptualized this and executed it made me a little bit irritated.
Right.
I mean, it's not like I think it should be boycotted. If that's your stuff, that's your stuff.
See, I've been done with Millar since Ultimates 2, and like every time someone says he's jumped this shark, I always think, no, now he's jumping and he's grabbing the shark in midair and putting the shark in back of him, and then there's an explosion behind as the shark is, and then the man.
You just walk up and like he and the shark are like flipping over to each other, like, how are you wires? No, but I mean I've enjoyed some of his stuff, like Old Man Logan. That was a lot of fun. It was terribly violent.
That was over the what I've seen of it
and that's
is
the thing,
over the
though,
top.
is you get down to it, it was really just a setup for a Hulk-Wolverine fight. And you actually kind of had to go, okay, I can see how this is going to be fun.
Right. Now I want to take a step back.
I will admit to liking that, yeah.
While we still have time, I want to take a step back from a lot of the American stuff and kind of go into a lot of what kind of being produced elsewhere. I know we have some examples here. One of which definitely kind of grabs my eye is Berserk.
Yeah.
That comic, manga. It's crazy, and the series was nuts. But and even though the violence was like so in your face and over the top, and you couldn't believe what you were seeing, the story was incredibly well executed. I mean, I found myself really caring about these people and where they were going, and then it wasn't so much looking forward to how this guy's going to lose a limb. It was all about just how these people reaching their goals. And so I wanted to just kind of open that up discussion about, you know, stuff like Battle Royale and Berserk and.
Well, Berserk, like you know, like every time you fight somebody, it's like either him or the other person, or like the characters die, like characters that you've been reading since like the 80s. They just die on you. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like people die in these books. Like they're not brought back to life. There's like nothing romantic about it. Like, you know, violence happens and they die. Like they have to live with the consequences. And like, you know, every time you fight somebody, he's like faced with these kind of decisions of what he does and how it affects the world. And it's really messed up. You know what I mean? And like Battle Royale is probably one of the most violent books that's like ever written. I mean, it is one of my favorite series, though. It's like the most violent porno I could ever imagine. That's what I was kind of describing.
That's a selling point right there. It's just a little cover blurb. The most violent porno you can imagine.
Seriously, I mean,
moreover, like the most violent porno Maggie can imagine. You know, like that says something.
Well, like basically, seriously. But basically, it's just like about these school kids are like, hey, you know, there's like a lottery, it's this like reality TV show, and it's like, hey, you know, your class got selected to go to this island, and you have to kill each other off, and if you don't kill each other and become friends, then you're gonna blow up in 3 days anyway, so deal with it. And then like they're given a duffel bag, and it's like some people get like a fork, and some people get like, you know, a gun or like a knife or an Uzi. And like, you know,
it's just it's like high school.
Exactly. and of course you have like your crazy people, and then you have like the thing I like about it is like one of the most badass characters is a chick. And like her name is, I call it Hardcore Soma. She's like my favorite character. She's like so insane and so sick and twisted. So it's like not even like about like violence. It's about like all like the messed up stuff that happens. And there's a lot of sexual violence too, which is pretty disturbing. But like I read it, I'm just like, oh my god, and it's so graphic.
Right. Now, one thing that is important to point out regarding this series and Berserk, it's wrapped in plastic.
Yes.
So no one can wander in and flip through the page. And also, there's a parental advisory, explicit content warning.
Yeah. Like if your kid comes in, like if some kid came to my store and was like, hey, I want to buy this, I'm like, oh yeah, freaking right, you know, like there's no way. Like if like someone's parent comes in, they're like, oh, I'm buying this for my kid, I'm like, hey, I was like, this is like really violent, you know, like anything that's like mature, you know, like you have to, you know, it's like if you go to Barnes & Noble, you can just like grab, you know, any kind of like adult book or anything like that and just buy it.
I'm going to say, as bad as some of this stuff is, you could walk into any bookstore in the world and you could pick up stuff that could arguably be more damaging to a child. Yeah. I mean, and that, I'm not saying that we should like ban books or anything like that, but I mean, just look at like there's a short story by someone whose name I just forgot, The Collector, which is quite literally about a serial killer in the process of slowly torturing and killing someone. Yeah. It's a very well written, very disturbing, very thought-provoking story, but you get down to it, it's almost downright pornographic in some places. With the level of description. And of course, this is about an individual who sexualizes violence and how he does this, and it's utterly horrifying. And now I read it as an adult, I'm able to extrapolate, okay, what's this say about society? What's this say about people? How do we detach ourselves? All this and that. But a kid could walk in and read that, and, you know,
like, oh my God.
He could do some pretty serious damage. But the thing is, so we got Berserk and Battle Royale, top shelf, wrapped in plastic. You need to, you're going to like refuse to sell it. I could walk in and buy that collection of short stories and give it to my little sister or someone. Well, she's beyond the age where that would be damaging, or like us. Yeah. You know, just walk up to a kid on the street and here, kid, read this, and no one would probably think twice. No one would think no one would double check if the kid walked in the store and bought that. So I find it interesting that we actually actively restrict one medium because of its presentations of violence, but other mediums, there's no regard to that.
It's like pictures. As long as it's not pictures, and it's okay.
You know, one thing that always kind of blew my mind too is the fact that like you can see someone getting riddled with bullets, but seeing two human beings sharing love and affection for each other is like, oh no, you can't.
Oh, I know. Like sex.
I should have looked this up. There was a great quote, and I can't remember who said it.
By some guy who said this thing.
If you lick a tit, you're R. If you cut it off, you're PG-13.
It's true. It's like what's wrong? What's so wrong with sex? I don't understand. Like it's okay to let your kids watch this crazy stuff, like violence, like on TV, just in general. Like even if you watch the news, like you're just like, oh my god, you know.
Oh yeah, we get like that's the thing is like there are like you watch CNN and I guarantee at some point in time you'll see some poor Afghani missing a limb. And
Yeah.
they won't censor it, they won't blur it out. I don't happen to believe that they should, but you can't depict that. But like Paul said,
my memory is going back to the 80s or early 90s. Madonna's "Justify My Love," like a 5-minute warning before they even aired the controversial video of the time, which is practically G-rated in comparison.
Yeah,
to most stuff on MTV today.
It's so bizarre that we can show all this violence, and people are like, oh, well, all these forms of media is a problem. It's just very strange what we choose to restrict, what we choose to show, and then when we don't like the outcome, we blame what we're allowing to be shown. It's just very, it's a funny world we live in.
It is. It's just people. People like are so easily offended by the smallest things that are so insignificant. Yeah. But when you really look at it, like what kids are watching, like my dad's like 65. My nephew watches like Ben 10, like all those crappy cartoons that they have, but like for kids just to sell action figures. But like he was just like, wow, like those are like really violent. Like they don't show blood. They usually show it like as black, or even like in a lot of anime like that's like geared for younger viewers. They don't show it as red. They show it as black. But it's still like really bloody and killing people and like. And it's just like, but like if you show it but just even show like a sexual situation that's like appropriate. That's like not even like being tied up and like whipped, you know what I mean? Like it's just like regular sex that's like
it's
really
natural.
A no-no. It's a natural, but it's a no-no to everybody, and it's just like it's just so ridiculous.
I mean, what's going to be more damaging to a child? Representation of something that hopefully will happen if they meet someone, fall in love, have sex. Hey, way to go! I totally endorse that. Or like Batman punching someone off a roof. It's like what's going to be more damaging? A representation of something that can actually be part of healthy human existence, or something that is arguably probably one of the most unhealthy things you can engage in.
And then it's weird when people are like, hey, my kid's watching this thing. It's like, well, you're allowing them to.
Yeah, it's
it's like 9 o'clock. Put your freaking kid to bed. Shit.
Or how about this? Sit down and talk with your child. Yeah. Hey, what are you reading there? Oh shit, where'd you get that?
To bring it back to comics, I keep on thinking about this controversy. I think it was in the late '60s. Steranko, who did those famous Nick Fury issues where like everyone's shooting everyone left and right. The most controversial image was this page where I guess I've seen it a couple of times where Nick Fury is basically like in this apartment with the woman he loves, and and they don't show anything. All they show is like a scene with the phone off the hook.
Yeah,
and they actually, I believe they actually censored that, or were moving to censor that.
They censored the phone?
They censored that image.
Well, the implication being that they actually wanted some time alone.
Unbelievable. Pretty soon, we're going to walk around with like blurred faces, and like handshaking will be like...
Yeah, we're going to wear like white suits with like gloves and like things on our face, and we're like, it's just going to be the stupidest thing. Tron. Yeah.
That's why you can't open cell phones anymore. They're all like one piece, and open phones dangerous.
Something just came to mind too, speaking of the 80s. I grew up watching RoboCop, Darkman.
Commando.
I never felt any...
Come on, Paul. Remember last week when you doused that guy in toxic waste and I drove the panel van into him?
Right. How can I forget?
Like Terminator? Come on.
Like that was different from any other Wednesday. Come on.
It's right. That's right.
Well, you get down to it, like, let's take Terminator as an example. The violence in Terminator was kind of it was a chase movie. It was serving a purpose. It gave a sense of imperilment. It gave a sense of danger.
Yeah.
It gave it like, okay, if she gets caught, we know what happens now. But you look at something else like, let's say, Commando. Which is possibly the single worst ultra-violent 80s movie ever made, where it is quite literally just hordes of dead people. So you got that disconnect. I think that kind of parallels to what we were talking about with the comics earlier. You need to hit a balance.
Yeah, you have to have some substance. Like, you have
Commando,
a reason
written by
for
Jeff
the violence.
Loeb. I bring it back full circle.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You just lobed it up.